It's June, it's hot, it's wet, it's sticky, yet here I am eating a bowl of curry. So today I'm going to be talking about English education in Japan. I think I mentioned before that my major was in primary education and I did a postgraduate, I did a postgraduate certificate in TESOL. As part of that certificate, I had to do a kind of a research project. I had to choose a country and analyze English education in that country's context. So I'm going to read through the paper that I wrote for that assignment to maybe give you a little bit of insight as to the state of English education in Japan, the history of English education in Japan, and maybe just some extra notes about my experiences as an ALT. So I'm basically just going to be reading this off my laptop, which is here. I'll stick the references down below. Okay, so let's get into it. Introduction. The English language is progressively becoming considered the rising world language. The response to the spread of English varies between cultures, ranging from viewing English as a cultural threat to accepting it as a lingua franca. My report focuses on Japan and how it has responded to the advance of English through its government and curricular reforms. And then the impact of these developments will be applied to the context of teaching as a JET ALT, obviously. Okay, so Japan first came into contact with the English language as early as the 1600s when Dutchman William Adams was washed ashore after a shipwreck. However, a policy of self-enforced isolation saw that the English language was not learned or valued by Japanese intellectuals until trade agreements with Holland in the 1800s brought the realization that English would be necessary to maintain global economic presence. The Meiji Restoration in 1868 saw English being taught in schools by 1872, marking Japan's dedication to modernization and English education, if only to prevent the colonization and invasion occurring in other Asian nations. The next major turning point for English education in Japan came with the Second World War. Prior to and during the war period, anti-American sentiments saw English abolished in many faculties and highly regulated within schools. Post-war American occupation brought a new foreign language curriculum, English resources, school restructuring, and immersion in American culture. This surge of English influence from foreign academia and media shaped the nature of and attitudes surrounding the English language we see in Japan today. Despite being linked to cultural and political unrest, English language learning is continually being met with enthusiasm by government authorities, provoking heated debates and highlighting the contrasting roles and statuses of English in Japan. Okay, so what are the roles and statuses of English in Japan? Well, the desirability and presence of English in Japan is increasing at a remarkable rate, despite being only a prestigious minority language in the daily lives of most Japanese nationals. As Kitao notes, the importance of English is not just how many people speak it, but in what it is used for. This purpose for English produces conflicting attitudes towards the role of English from different Japanese perspectives. Within the spheres of education and business, English proficiency is highly esteemed as a tool to promote the Japanese culture and economy on a global stage. English in Japan from this perspective can be best described as what Katsu defines as Asian English, a nativized form of English used to serve Japan and international relationships in the Asia-Pacific region. Japanese English is distinct in its lack of friction sounds and inflection and the use of Japanese loan words in English conversation. English is described as the most basic skill required to access and understand the world, particularly since the prevalence of global media travel and the internet has been consistently on the rise. English as a tool is a recurring attitude neutralizing the language to make it adaptable to Japanese culture. While met with interest and highly valued in this regard, English is still very much viewed as a foreign language and has attracted its share of negative attention. Many criticisms have been raised surrounding the place of English in Japan due to its perceived lack of relevance and confliction with nationalist ideals. In the public sphere, English is regarded as a foreign language useful only on an international level. Nationalist views that wish to emphasize the cultural and linguistic uniqueness of Japan condemn the use and teaching of English altogether. Despite efforts to neutralize the language, from this perspective, English is perceived to be a cultural force that will compromise the uniqueness they wish to maintain and change Japan's cultural identity. This tension between Japanese nationalism and international competitiveness is intensified through debates surrounding politics and language policy. So, language policy and politics. Well, in January 2000, an advisory commission had suggested that Japan should adopt English as an official language in their report, The Frontier Within: Individual Empowerment and Better Governance in the New Millennium. Of all the issues addressed in this report, this issue proved to be the most controversial. Although the proposal didn't carry any weight in terms of changing policy, it triggered a new awareness of the reality of the spread of English and its expanding importance in Japanese economics and politics. It was not long thereafter that the Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology, or MEXT, published its Strategic Plan to Cultivate Japanese with English Abilities in 2001 and Action Plan for Producing English-Speaking Japanese in 2003 in an attempt to improve English teaching, learning and proficiency. Within this language policy, there is a resounding emphasis on international, primarily English, opposed to international communication. However, the Japanese language is still unsurprisingly a core aspect of policy and education. Although the Japanese language is regarded to be a spiritual blood of the Japanese people, Japanese language policy and education has not been without contention. Strict language policies of the Meiji period saw Japanese all but wipe out indigenous dialects, with schools where Japanese is the primary means of instruction being significantly more likely to meet government guidelines and be eligible for government support. Within the vested interest of the internationalization of Japan, MEXT and national language authorities are currently acting on recommendations to promote and support the learning of Japanese as an additional language, improve communication between Japanese speakers and Japanese learners, and manage the influx of katakana-go, or loanwords, to the Japanese language. The matter of loanwords is of particular public interest, as while they can cause written and verbal communication complications between demographics and impose on national identity, enforcing change has the potential to infringe on the language rights of citizens, I guess. So this is where we get to learning English in Japan. In response to these policy reforms and such, English is now an integral part of the curricula throughout all stages of education. In 2002, it was mandated that all junior high and high school students participate in 3 foreign language education classes per week. While not specifying English overwhelmingly became the language applied. Beyond school, English learning courses taught in English, and foreign exchange opportunities are increasing at the tertiary level in response to MEXT plans to internationalize Japanese education and promote Japanese universities. Eikaiwa, or English conversation clubs and institutions, are a primary choice for adult Japanese learners of English. With a multitude of nationwide chains, privately owned facilities, and one-on-one tutoring options available, Eikaiwa provides English learning in a leisurely setting more desirable to casual learners of English. In this setting, English is consumed as a commodity and a means of enjoyment without the intention of improving career or travel prospects like their tertiary counterparts. English villages, camps, and theme parks are additionally scattered around the country to provide authentic and leisurely approach to English language learning. Japanese culture places a strong emphasis on education, with around 90% of junior high school students going on to senior high school, and then half of those graduating proceeding into tertiary education. MEXT is the main governing body. MEXT is the main governing body for education in Japan. They oversee the regional boards of education in each prefecture. So the structure of education in Japan as defined by MEXT outlines 9 years of compulsory schooling. Within these 9 years, MEXT sets out a minimum set of standards that have to be achieved, known as the courses of study. In 2004, the Central Council for Education released a report containing recommendations for the reforming of compulsory education. In response to this, MEXT committed to the revision of school infrastructure and courses of study within which foreign language education was a priority. The new courses of study released in 2008 began implementation in schools in 2011, bringing with them many new considerations for teaching and reflections on past methodologies. Historically, Japan has fallen behind the rest of the world in English language teaching methodology and proficiency. And just my own personal opinion, that's still pretty true. Coinciding with this, previous trends led students to go elsewhere in Asia in order to gain English proficiency necessary to access the lucrative high-performing universities in English-speaking countries. This has been attributed to Japan's previously inefficient and culturally irrelevant teaching methods, alongside a delayed response to current global trends. In the past, groups have insisted on abolishing compulsory English education on the basis of this lack of motivation, cultural necessity, and effectiveness in the Japanese context. As Ike cites, the method of teaching English in Japan, whose language bears no linguistic similarity to any of the European languages, is not much different from that used in continental Europe and therefore has proved inefficient and unproductive. Okuno additionally criticizes that MEXT takes it for granted that English is all that foreign language means, ignoring student motivations and the possibility of more demographically relevant language teaching. So, for example, it would be more demographically relevant to teach Portuguese, Korean, or a Chinese dialect. While reforms since the turn of the century have seen an invigoration of communicative teaching methodologies, culturally relevant resources, and the utilizing of English natives through the JET program, MEXT remains criticized for its unrealistic goals, shortfalls in teacher training, and hypocritical emphasis on non-communicative assessment. While MEXT has actively sought to revitalize and reattempt a more speaking and listening orientated approach to communicative language teaching within the new foreign languages courses of study, this has been met with uncertainty, confusion, and a general lack of understanding. Put simply, this method of teaching and learning is not well understood within the Japanese culture, and MEXT has failed to support teachers prior to the 2011 implementation. This continued lack of support from the initial stages of reform in the early 2000s has sparked what could be said to be an over-reliance on English native speakers who, ironically, have failed to receive any explicit teaching in communicative language methodologies themselves. MEXT has responded to this with the English Education Reform Plan corresponding to globalization, which was due to commence last year. This places a strong emphasis on empowering teachers and utilizing JET ALTs on a more authentic level within the new courses of study. Yay! Currently, Japanese teachers at English are trying to navigate the new courses of study and the subsequent demands on students. Okay, so now I want to take the time to focus on, I guess, my context and the key implications of English education in Japan. So of the issues discussed up to this point, reforms brought about by the new courses of study, teacher education, authentic involvement of ALTs, and the implementation of modern pedagogies have the greatest implications for English teaching practice in Japanese schools. Let's have a look at ALT training, development, and support. Prior to placements in schools, JET ALTs undergo a series of mandatory orientations, both in their home country and placement location, as well as an ALT skill development conference at the prefectural level. Periodically throughout the placement, a variety of language and pedagogy courses are made available. And there's also a network of support provided by both MEXT and CLARE for ALTs. However, in my experience, a lot of this support has kind of been dismantled over the past year, and the courses that CLARE provides aren't exactly top-notch. I think the criticism that JET ALTs aren't as qualified to do the jobs that they're often expected to do is a fair call. ALTs are often expected to do things in the English learning classroom that they're really not trained to do. This then just throws back on the whole over-reliance on native speakers. Okay, so let's think about English methodology. Communicative language teaching is the English teaching methodology prevalent in many Asian nations, including Japan. However, for a JET ALT, it is noted that the emphasis should be on enjoyment and communication. The Council of Local Authorities for International Relations, CLARE, that agency I mentioned before, is one of the authorities involved with JET ALTs. They say that English should be taught in a fun and natural way using activities such as songs and games. These sentiments are reflected by the experiences of lots of ALTs that I know and myself. I try to make my lessons as relaxed and interactive as possible, but teaching in a senior high school, I do often experience the teaching to the test kind of methodology, and it's not a lot of fun. There's lots of like translation or grammatical work that, to be honest, I really don't need to be there for. I feel like I've encountered a lack of confidence from Japanese teachers of English in their own teaching capabilities, and a lack of faith in these communicative teaching methodologies. They're just so comfortable working from the textbook as they do that they're really unwilling to change. So English classes and assessments. In my school, I mostly teach international course students, so they'll have English classes 9 times a week. I'm not actually sure what the mandatory amount is for other courses, but 9 classes a week is a lot. I know in the elementary level that according to MEXT, ALTs are supposed to participate in around 60 to 70% of foreign language activities classes. So ALTs are really expected to play a big role in their school's English education programs. It is the role of the ALT to work within a team teaching environment alongside a homeroom teacher or Japanese teacher of English to make English learning an authentic and engaging experience. It's supposed to be in the only very occasional situation that an ALT does a lesson by themselves. Sometimes I've had to do lessons by myself when a teacher has had a training day or something, or a meeting. I really don't like doing lessons by myself because then I feel like I'm filling the role of the Japanese teacher, and that's really not my job. I feel like I am there as a resource, as a model for English communication, and if I'm there doing the teacher job, then the students aren't really witnessing any authentic English being used. They're just watching me read from a textbook and check their work. Assessment of English is kind of a big deal. There's a massive test-based culture, and this has led even young students to strongly consider future examinations and career prospects in their study of English. So kids as young as elementary or junior high school will study English really hard because they know they want to go to a foreign university or something like that. English proficiency remains a really important aspect of entrance examinations, both to senior high school and university, and is frequently used as a motivating factor for younger students. So this just feeds even more into the teaching to the test culture. So let's talk about facilities. So in an elementary school, English is likely to be integrated into the homeroom classroom, but in junior high school and senior high schools, there may be a standalone language learning or English studio that English classes will take place in. In my school, I'm quite lucky, and it's quite rare that my students can sit around a round table. This is an ideal situation for me because not only does it allow them to work in pairs, but they can work in a group on different projects. They can have group discussions, they can have table debates, which is a lot harder to do when the students are in their homeroom classes sitting in rows. Many ALTs I know have an overabundance of flashcards that they and predecessors have made. Many schools have access to color printers, cardboard, laminators, all that sort of stuff you need to make those sort of cards. It should be noted that many classrooms don't have access to a lot of technology. Japan isn't as technologically advanced or inclined as foreigners might think. It is very likely that all you'll have in your room is a whiteboard, and if you're lucky, a projector. So if you're looking to teach in Japan, get ready to teach under a tree. Okay, so I guess to summarize, English teaching and learning in Japan is undeniably a contentious issue, with a distinct tension between the need for international competitiveness and the desire to remain culturally and linguistically unique. As an ALT that tries to implement relevant, culturally sensitive English education, these reoccurring sentiments of English as a tool to culturally serve Japan, this is something that I consider a lot. So my discussion today has drawn attention to the inconsistencies between theory and practice that are continually present in Japanese English education programs as the result of culturally irrelevant approaches and inadequate teacher training. I think professional development and learning surrounding both English and Japanese dialects, Japanese learning contexts and their goals for English learning will ultimately aid an ALT in being able to collaboratively create a meaningful English program. So to summarize, appropriate pedagogy must also be a pedagogy of appropriation. Okay, so I hope you guys found that at least maybe a little bit informative. If you're thinking of coming to teach in Japan, I think it's worth your while knowing, I guess, the state of the affairs. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time.